Good afternoon, Bahamas, our tourism colleagues, and international viewers. And good afternoon to ladies and gentlemen of the media. I'm Mercedes Demerit, Senior Manager of Domestic Communications at the Bahamas Ministry of Tourism and Aviation, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's Minister's Report. Joining us live are three members of the senior executive team at the Bahamas Ministry of Tourism and Aviation: Minister, the Honorable Dionisio de Aguilar, Director General, Ms. Joy Girbelou, and Permanent Secretary, Mr. Charles Aubrey. We are also joined by Mr. Tommy Turnquest, Chairman of Bahamas Air, and Mr. Algernon Cargill, Director of Aviation. We will begin with remarks from the Minister, which include updates on tourism recovery efforts, followed by an insightful presentation on the future of travel by the Director General, and will close with questions from the media. To bring his remarks, ladies and gentlemen, Minister de Aguilar.
Good afternoon, Bahamas. In this nation's short but determined history, moments of triumph and moments of tragedy tell the story of who we are as Bahamians. We are a proud people, a strong people, a united people. Nonetheless, this year has undoubtedly been marred by moments of tragedy. The wounds of Hurricane Dorian have yet to heal. COVID-19 has brought tourism to a standstill, and tens of thousands of Bahamians have been tragically left without jobs. But still, we march. For Bahamians are no strangers to making history under challenging, seemingly impossible circumstances. After Hurricane Dorian, when the world showed the Bahamas as a nation ripped to pieces, blown away by an unthinkable force, the Bahamas showed the world a people united in a shared spirit of struggle, stewardship, and service. My ministry went to great lengths to share with media, travel sites, and consumers the world over that we are indeed a family of islands, urging travelers to visit our shores as the most valuable form of help in rebuilding our nation. The strategy worked, and so they came. In 2019, under challenging, seemingly impossible circumstances, the Bahamas recorded our strongest tourism numbers ever, with 7.2 million visitor arrivals. Today, we face a storm of a much different kind. This one we cannot predict, but this time we can do our very best to take care of Bahamians. I have every confidence that this Bahamas will once again persevere and emerge prouder, stronger, and more united than before. I'm indeed grateful for the opportunity to speak this afternoon, along with the Director General of Tourism, about the plans for the reopening of our tourism sector. Few can argue with the fact that since the 1950s, tourism has accelerated the growth of the Bahamian economy to a scale unrivaled across the Caribbean, facilitating the expansion of our middle class, the education of our children, and the socio-economic means to earn an honest living. As we all know, tourism has been the #1 provider of employment for the Bahamas, the #1 provider of foreign exchange for the Bahamas, and the #1 source of revenue for the Treasury of the Bahamas. Any other economic sector was a distant second. I suspect also that, in the short term, there is no other economic sector existing or currently contemplated that can deliver with immediacy and magnitude foreign exchange, employment levels, and tax revenues like tourism. Time and again, this industry has demonstrated its resilience, recovering and rebounding after hurricanes, previous pandemics, and global economic downturns. Over the last 3 years, no one can question that tourism has generated record visitor arrivals and ever-increasing tax receipts and ever-increasing employment. The peculiarity of tourism is the need for social gathering between travelers and between travelers and service providers. This is why this pandemic has affected tourism globally so substantially. It is impossible to overstate the destabilizing impact of COVID-19 on not only the global industry, but our local tourism product. Moreover, this downturn has emboldened cynics on Bahamian social media, whose false narratives have clouded our collective understanding of tourism. It is critical in these uncertain times that we separate fact from fiction and remind Bahamians why the tourism sector, the tourism industry, has and will always remain an integral component of our economy. There are three local and universal truths which bear greater emphasis. Ones which should silence this disinformation campaign the vocal minority are working hard to spread. One, tourism's economic potential is unparalleled. Travel and tourism remains the world's second fastest growing sector, an increasingly resilient industry, and the world's largest employer of both skilled and unskilled workers. Every economy in the world is involved in the tourism trade. Two, tourism's impact on trade and investment is huge. Few industries bring in more foreign currency and boost foreign reserves. Many developing countries, including the Bahamas, rely on tax receipts from their tourism industries to facilitate food and construction imports. And three, tourism has done more to facilitate human and capital development throughout the Bahamas than any other industry. Tax receipts have for years funded essential investments in housing, education, health, government services, and infrastructural development. More than 50% of the government's direct and indirect tax revenue comes from our 7 million visitors who flock to our shores each year. Quite simply, no industry takes better care of Bahamians than tourism. When you consider tourism as a marketplace, an enabler of economic activity and trade, it's much easier to see the immense benefit the industry brings to Bahamians. Think about the boaters, the taxi drivers, the divers, the fishermen, the craftsmen, the artisans, the tour guides, those authentically Bahamian entrepreneurs, alongside realtors, lawyers, accountants, grocers, insurers, and a host of other service providers. These livelihoods represent so much of what the Bahamian economy has to offer, and each relies extensively on the tourism industry. Tourism is a collective economic force, one in which every citizen and resident is involved, whether we or they like it or not. This is especially true of our model of tourism, where we want our visitors to roam freely across the length and breadth of our communities and our archipelago. As far as possible, we want our visitors to avoid tourism zones so that we can ensure the broadest possible distribution of income and benefits of tourism. This is why we were so heartened by the rapid growth of such phenomena as Airbnb, where visitors are ending up in parts of the Bahamas never before able to directly benefit from tourism. But it's hardly a secret that the spirit has slowly started to fade. While tourism has indeed served us well over the years, increasing foreign currency reserves and investment inflows, the industry has seen very little growth, Bahamian growth, for almost 2 decades. These pillars of tourism, foreign currency, investment, and air access, were stronger in the Bahamas than any other nation in the Caribbean. But we did not reinvest most of our hard-earned dollars in building and developing the local tourism marketplace. In most countries, including the US, 80% of that marketplace is defined by small businesses, mom-and-pop shops, and small entrepreneurs who are willing to take risks to achieve success. And that marketplace, which has greatly expanded the US economy, is the most diversified in the world. And so, when we talk about diversification from tourism, it suggests a misunderstanding of trade, of markets, and how economies function. Instead, we must talk about diversification within tourism. It means we have to incorporate more local content from manufacturing, culture and heritage, arts and entertainment, accommodations, restaurants, authentically Bahamian products, and transportation to build a dynamic market and to ensure that every dollar spent by the visitor on those goods and services stays in country and in the hands of Bahamians. Indeed, Bahamians have the most to benefit. When operating with proper oversight and transparent governance, tourism is an equal opportunity provider, an equitable, honest means of making a living. That means that anyone with skills and resources, no matter how small, can access the industry for trade purposes. Can we improve on this tourism model to increase trade and economic opportunity? Absolutely. I say it again. Tourism does not operate in a vacuum. It does not produce anything, but instead relies on local assets in nature, culture and heritage, value-added change, and sectoral linkages to agriculture, maritime, construction, transport, arts and entertainment, marine activities, and real estate and retail. Everything comes together to create a dynamic marketplace for the production and sale of goods and services. The Ministry of Tourism then steps in and determines the natural and unique attributes of this marketplace to promote brand Bahamas on the global stage, which attracts international buyers trading in all manners of goods and services that fall under the umbrella of leisure and hospitality. However, we must be mindful of the challenges and circumstances facing the Bahamas. Our marketplace is more vulnerable than many in our region and indeed around the world. It is neither as robust nor as competitive as it could be. It lacks diversity, and it has been starved of significant increases in new, locally owned businesses and market innovation for many years. That is why the recent announcement of the development of Jack's Bay and Eleuthera by Bahamian entrepreneurs is so in line with the untapped opportunities for the Bahamas. Other jurisdictions have taken advantage of digital platforms to make doing business easier and more convenient for the customer and to enable someone in Asia, the UK, or the US to find their marketplace of products and services online and to plan and purchase products from wherever they are in the world. These digital platforms have transformed the leisure and hospitality markets in Europe, the US, Canada, and Asia from localized markets to globalized markets. But the digital era has still not firmly taken root in the Bahamian tourism economy. So many of our small and medium enterprises are finding that business growth and continuity is increasingly challenged, rendering them invisible and uncompetitive in the global tourism marketplace. I say to you that, like all industries, tourism has its challenges, and Lord knows that COVID-19 has proven to be a formidable opponent. But if we bind together as a nation, if we can adhere to the health protocols and govern ourselves with discipline and accountability, we can and will overcome this affliction. We will get back to work, adapt to a new normal, and build a better and safer tourism marketplace. That is what we are preparing to do in the Ministry of Tourism, helping make the industry better for Bahamians. No small task, especially under a new array of challenging, seemingly impossible circumstances. The Bahamas has seen a significant fall-off in visitor arrivals during the first 6 months of the year, from a record 3.9 million visitor arrivals in 2019 to 1.7 million in 2020. This 56% reduction in our tourism business could not be avoided, owing to the shutdown of both the cruise and airline industries in late March, alongside a resurgence of COVID-19 in many of our key markets, Florida, Texas, California, and Georgia. With our tourism marketplace at an effective standstill, my ministry was tasked with developing robust protocols for the safe, eventual reopening of the tourism industry. When we first closed our borders on March the 20th, the Ministry of Tourism quickly established, through public-private partnerships, a committee tasked with creating national tourism readiness and recovery guidelines. These incorporated the strictest health protocols, sanitation standards, and best practice operational models from both regional and international health agencies to ensure as comprehensive a plan as possible. The Tourism Readiness and Recovery Plan has been praised extensively by international tourism agencies and has been accepted as the standard operational plan for all Bahamian-based tourism enterprises moving forward. To date, over 15,000 Bahamians have been trained in this protocol for reopening the tourism industry, with further training resuming later this month. The Tourism Readiness and Recovery Plan is an incredibly comprehensive document encompassing the entire guest experience from their arrival through departure. Protocols for sanitation, the wearing of masks, and social distancing ensure that both tourists and Bahamians are taken care of. With today's travelers demanding rigorous hygiene standards, cleanliness, and overall safety, we feel that our Tourism Readiness and Recovery Plan addresses, if not exceeds, these expectations. And to its credit, As often stated by public health officials, contact tracing has revealed that there has been near zero transmission of COVID-19 from a visitor to the Bahamas to any of our citizens, residents, and for that matter, any fellow traveler. In record time, the Digital Technology Unit of the government's Department of Information Technology has rolled out a travel health visa electronic platform. For those of you that are not familiar with this new requirement, any person who is overseas, out of the country, and who wants to come into or enter the Bahamas, he or she must now apply for a travel health visa at travel.gov.bs. Before you apply, however, you must be in possession of an RT-PCR COVID-19 test, which can only be 5 days old when you arrive at the border. It was 10 days, now it is 5 days. Obviously, the shorter the period between the taking of the test and presenting at the border, the greater the accuracy of the test. Once you upload your tests, the newly formed Travel Compliance Unit at the Ministry of Tourism will review the test and make sure that it is negative within the required time period and from an accredited lab. If all is in order, your travel visa is approved via email. Despite some initial hiccups, the system is working well, probably because visitor levels are extremely light. Once our visitor arrivals start to ramp back up, however, we will need added features to speed up processing time to ensure travelers are not inconvenienced by long wait times for a travel health visa. So we are actively looking at private sector solutions to allow for a more instantaneous approval using AI, artificial intelligence. The situation is very fluid, and we are actively seeking to get ahead of it. Indeed, this Ministry of Tourism is committed to engaging with as many stakeholders as possible to develop our own reopening strategy. We have been guided chiefly by the Ministry of Health in establishing the appropriate protocols and timelines with respect to the RT-PCR testing in advance of travel. It bears repeating, though, that all international travelers are required to take the test 5 days in advance of travel and to quarantine for 14 days upon arrival. These measures are not overly punitive, but are rather designed to promote the health and safety of both Bahamians and our visitors. As the attached slide reveals, they are also consistent with other notable destinations within the Caribbean. In fact, our safety measures are, from a practical standpoint, the most robust in the region. And travelers applaud these strict protocols and are actively looking for destinations that prioritize safety. A survey conducted by the Bahamas Out Island Promotion Board, taken in July 2020, revealed that 82% of travelers were willing to take a COVID test prior to arrival. To further limit the spread of COVID-19 in our communities, all hotels will be deemed an approved quarantine facility, and visitors will be required to remain on site for the duration of their stay, and what we have designated as a tourism-safe bubble. Moreover, because the Ministry of Tourism recognizes that messaging is critical to instilling confidence from both our local population and our international tourism markets, we have carefully chosen language that communicates the act of quarantining, a rather harsh word that conjures up in the minds of the prospective travelers something most unpleasant, especially when you state that persons entering the country have to, quote, quarantine for 14 days, and some may have to do that, quote, in a government-mandated facility. Not very tourism-friendly. Therefore, I have instructed the Ministry of Tourism to stop using that word, quarantine, and start promoting to the visiting public the full VIP experience. VIP, vacation in place. Now let me repeat that before the WhatsApps start flying. Instead of designating the act of remaining on a hotel property as quarantining, we are instead referring to it as vacationing in place. The two procedures are exactly the same, and the VIP experience remains governed extensively by the protocols outlined in the emergency orders and the Tourism Readiness and Recovery Plan. You see, industry research has proven travelers are less willing to quarantine, and so by shifting perspectives, our destination becomes much more attractive to prospective visitors. It's also important to note that you can vacation in place for 14 days or the length of your stay, whichever is shorter. You are not required, because of the quarantining regulation, to come to the Bahamas for a minimum stay of 14 days. You can come to visit for, say, 5 days, But for those 5 days, you can only vacation in place, in your hotel, or engage in activities operated by hotel staff. Given that visitors to a hotel will have been tested prior to their arrival, it only makes sense that the staff is tested also to maintain the requisite environment to safely vacation in place. As such, after consultation with public health, the competent authority, and the hotel industry, the Ministry of Tourism is strongly recommending, actively encouraging, that all hotel staff be tested prior to their resuming work and on an as-needed basis thereafter. Now, I recognize that testing all of a hotel staff using the PCR tests can be extremely costly, over $200 a person. So public health officials see no problem with hotel properties, and any other businesses for that matter, using, if they wish, far less expensive CDC-approved tests that have proven accuracy levels that are in striking range of the PCR gold standard test. These tests will be used for primary screening, and the PCR tests will be used for secondary screening if the need arises. We are pleased that the public health officials have agreed that some form of testing, other than the PCR testing, can be used for this purpose. In fact, they have indicated that they view this as another layer of protection for our workers, together with the wearing of face masks, social distancing, and other PPEs that will be obligatory. Our goal is to ultimately promote the health and safety of all hotel staff through this robust, holistic approach. To be clear, however, these non-PCR tests will not be included in any COVID-19 statistics released by the Ministry of Health and should be used as a primary screening technique. With the most recent emergency orders, we are already midstream in our phased tourism reopening. It is important that Bahamians temper their expectations of what they expect their tourism product to look like in the short, medium term. Our recommendation to the government will be the implementation of a 15th of October 2020 reopening for hotels on all islands to resume full operations and the full use of the beach, a critical component of our tourism product, and as will be shown in the Director General's presentation, the #1 reason why persons come on vacation to the Bahamas. This will allow our land-based tourism industry enough time to slowly ramp up to benefit from the traditional Thanksgiving travel period leading into the Christmas and New Year season. I noted the general feeling of euphoria among Bahamians after the Prime Minister announced the lessening of restrictions in his remarks on Monday, the 24th of August. And as we look forward to reopening, we must understand that each of us has an innate responsibility to ensure that we reopen safely and in a sustainable way. We cannot afford to open and then close right back down again. That was too traumatic for the tourism sector and significantly impacted our relationship with our travel partners. We need a period of calm, a period of certainty, and a period for those in the tourism sector to methodically plan the measured reopening of their businesses. Of utmost importance will be adherence to health and safety protocols for our communities so that we stand a much better chance of a successful recovery and an eventual return to full employment in our industry. With regard to airlift, obviously you cannot have a tourism industry without sufficient flights bringing passengers to your country. The private aviation sector has done well over the last couple of months, catering to the very higher-end tourism market. But the reinstatement of commercial flights is an absolute must to restart our tourism sector. Commercial airlines will always say that. They will fly where there is demand. And early indications are they are eager to come back to the Bahamas. JetBlue is already coming. Air Canada is already coming. American Airlines starts this week. And Delta and Southwest are poised to restart in early October, once they learn that the tourism sector is back up and running. Understand that the schedules are extremely limited, given that current demand levels are not as robust as they once were. With regard to Bahamas Air and other domestic carriers, it is expected that they will be allowed to commence domestic operations in the latter part of this week, while international operations should recommence closer to the date when the tourism sector reopens. I've been in a number of discussions with the CEOs of Atlantis and Bahama to ascertain what their current thinking is about reopening, and I am hoping that they will make some announcements very soon with concrete opening dates. Naturally, given the enormous amount of resources required to relaunch properties of their respective sizes, they want to be assured of an economically sustainable customer base when they reopen. As such, they are assessing a myriad of issues, mostly relating to the state of the pandemic in their core market, the United States, before they commit to an opening announcement. I want to assure the Bahamian people and the workers in those 2 anchor properties that we, in the Ministry of Tourism, are doing everything that we can to make their opening a reality as soon as possible. With relation to the cruise market, unfortunately, there is no good news to report. I've been in discussions with all of the major cruise lines, and none of them have received any indication from the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, when their no-sail orders will be lifted. Right now, all of the cruise companies have voluntarily agreed that they will not be sailing until the 31st of October 2020, but sadly, it seems very likely that cruising out of the United States will not recommence until possibly late November or early December. There is good news, however. The cruise industry has actually started back up with a very, very limited number of cruises in Europe. So there are signs of a rebirth taking place. And according to the cruise companies, the demand for cruises remains extremely robust. People want to cruise. They just need the ships to get permission to do so. Of course, when cruising resumes, the Bahamas is in a wonderful position to take advantage of this industry. Travelers will want to start on short cruises, not venture far from home. And there is no country better positioned than the Bahamas to fulfill this demand. Cruising will probably start out with quick stops to the respective private islands, but the Ministry of Tourism will be shortly thereafter urging the cruise companies to make stops in our economic centers like Nassau and Freeport. And upon arrival, the cruise companies will only allow their guests to go on excursions to demonstrate very high health and safety protocols. So businesses, get ready and start preparing yourself for that eventuality. I want to assure the Bahamian people that this Ministry of Tourism is leaving no stone unturned to help bring the industry back online. During the first wave, we implemented numerous components of the Tourism Readiness and Recovery Plan, but we will be advancing the full scope of training to ensure that our people are primed for reopening. However, we need your help. I implore each and every Bahamian to adhere to the Ministry of Health's protocols so that when our source markets of Florida, New York, Texas, and California rebound, our labor force will be healthy and in high gear, poised to benefit from travel inflows. I am optimistic about this future, and with the support and participation of every Bahamian, believe that we can achieve a full reopening of our tourism sector by early November. Thanksgiving and the holiday period can be a much-needed boon for international arrivals, if we get this right. Please, Bahamas, do your part so that we can realize this goal and make the industry better for Bahamians. Wash your hands frequently, wear masks fitted properly over your nose and mouth, and abide by social distancing requirements. Business owners, please enforce proper protocols. As we work towards this phased reopening of tourism, we know that it is important to strategically inspire and increase consumer desire for travel to the Bahamas, especially owing to the confusion of openings, closings, and constant changes in our travel protocols. We have worked on ensuring our messaging is clear, comprehensive, and most importantly, consistently available to the traveling public. Our current dashboard serves as an easy-to-understand resource for those interested in visiting our country, complete with a pre-departure checklist, on-island expectations, and penalties for visitors who choose not to comply. Additionally, we continue to work strategically with our airline partners to secure direct airlift from key markets where the curve has been flattened. Continued engagement with airline partners and the strengthening of our relationship has ensured we are top of the list when schedules are brought back online. We realize, however, there is much uncertainty as COVID-19 spikes and fluctuations can happen at any time. Much like we did in the weeks post-Hurricane Dorian, we are prepared to commence a flexible marketing campaign, complete with authentic storytelling, aggressive public relations, and proven sales strategies. Consistent and frequent messaging will be key. Our advertising spend will be concentrated on the identified airlift markets to deliver direct, impactful messaging where it matters most. Through public relations and media stories, we will lean into current travel trends, such as the preference for vacations closer to home, as well as options that afford seclusion and outdoor pursuits. And we have some advantages in that regard. You will have seen reports in the news about research that shows that the Bahamas is among the top destinations desired by North Americans wishing to make an international trip. The Director General will speak more to that in her presentation. Our proximity to North America makes the Bahamas a very easy trip for those persons who feel that they need that quick getaway after being under lockdown and curfews for such long periods, but do not want to travel far from home. That said, we will focus on the Bahamas' close proximity to the US, which has long been an important advantage, and promote our secluded family islands with their rich selection of eco-adventures and beautiful beaches, all naturally designed for social distancing. In the short term, we know that our niche markets of diving, fishing, boating, and ecotourism are going to be important in helping us to rebound. And we will be devising campaigns in concert with those sector stakeholders to ensure that we can maximize impact from the ministry's targeted marketing efforts. In the medium term, we will also focus on digital marketing and curating outdoor activities around national parks and soft adventure tourism to expand the suite of products available to guests in this post-COVID-19 environment. How successful we will be in reviving and sustaining our industry will depend on your commitment to work with us in ensuring the health and safety of our labor force, and ultimately our tourism industry, so that we can continue to live the lifestyles that we have become accustomed to and provide quality service and unparalleled hospitality to our visitors. The maxim, the health of a nation is the wealth of a nation, has never been truer. Our health will be directly rewarded with increasing wealth. And we can only succeed in this endeavor as a community. As such, even in the face of these challenging, seemingly impossible circumstances, let this be a moment of triumph to tell the story of how proud, how strong, how united we are as Bahamians. Today, I'm accompanied by Parliamentary Secretary Travis Robinson, Director General of Tourism Joy Jiberlu, Permanent Secretary Charles Aubrey, Director of Aviation Algernon Cargill, Chairman of Bahamas Air, the Honorable Tommy Turnquest. I would like to thank Team Tourism for their incredible work in these challenging times. And of course, I would like to thank all of our hotel partners and other industry partners for all the hard work and perseverance as we seek to reopen our ever-important tourism sector. A lot of hard work goes on behind the scenes to make things happen, and I want to ensure that this is publicly acknowledged. Thank you, good afternoon, and may God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Minister, for those informative and inspiring remarks. To elaborate on the future of travel, I welcome Director General Ms. Joy Jiberlu.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much. Following upon Minister Diaghile's remarks, I would like to focus for a few moments on what the data and research is showing relative to travel. I know that there is genuine concern and even some degree of skepticism as to whether there is even an interest in travel for the foreseeable future. And it is hoped that the slides that I'm about to share will allay some of those concerns. In mapping out our strategy for the reopening of the sector, and even whether we still have an industry to reopen, the Ministry of Tourism monitors multiple data points, booking patterns, and travel trends to help inform our decision-making. This slide shows total users and stakeholder leads to the Bahamas.com website. We can see that leads to the website were, as expected, high in February, and once international borders and travel closed generally, they took the expected dip in March, April, and May. The great news is that once we announced the reopening for July, visits to Bahamas.com surpass those of our pre-COVID days, demonstrating the pent-up interest and demand for the Bahamas. The numbers naturally fell again when we went into lockdown in August and introduced new travel restriction measures. Another feature that we look at are the booking windows. How far in advance are people booking a vacation to the Bahamas? According to research done on the Book Now widget on Bahamas.com, in August, we saw that travelers were looking at November and December vacation days. It should be noted, however, that each time a change is announced to our travel policy, the booking window is impacted. And as a result, our booking window has gone from 30 to 60 days to 60, 90, and even 100 days out. But we are confident that once we reopen and stabilize, we will build back consumer confidence and that these numbers will decrease again. In the first phase of reopening in October, we will be focusing our marketing and attention on the North American market. It is where we have airlift, and given the proximity and the desire of people to travel close to home, including the Bahamas, it just makes sense. A survey conducted by Travel Zoo in mid-August shows that people are more confident, and particularly Americans, booking this year due to flexible cancellation policies, but are actually seeking to travel next year. So we see Americans trending 40% ahead, willing to book now, and Canadians behind them at 30%. According to the same survey taken by Travel Zoo in mid-August, the great news for us is that 46% and 49% of Americans and Canadians respectively are interested in traveling to the Caribbean. Next slide. The highest percentage for any region at this time. We actually also see a considerable amount of undecided travelers, and we know that they also provide an opportunity for us at tourism to convert them to travelers as well. Even better news for us in this region is that when people were asked specifically which country in the Caribbean they wanted to travel to, American respondents rated the Bahamas second out of the top 10 destinations, and Canadians placed the Bahamas fourth out of the top 10 destinations as their Caribbean destination of choice to visit. Persons were then asked, what were your top reasons for selecting a destination? And this is a Travel Zoo member survey taken in mid-August. And the results were that the top reason for selecting a destination was the feeling of safety from a health and safety perspective. So this was top of the list for both American and Canadian travelers. And it drives home the point that health and safety remain a main concern for the traveling public. Noteworthy, however, in that same survey was that amongst everything, clear travel information ranks number one, even above cleanliness. And so Minster shared our travel protocols and the requirements that will be shared on all our social media platforms with our travel partners and our airline partners to ensure that there is no ambiguity in requirements for entry to the Bahamas or what to expect when visitors actually arrive in country. In a survey conducted by Magma Global a few months ago, people were asked, after travel restrictions have been lifted, what will influence your decision in choosing a hotel? Noteworthy, the two top priorities were flexibility with the booking and cleanliness. And so we make this point the need for flexibility by all our tourism partners, whether hotel partners, excursion partners, tour operators. This is what people are seeking more than anything else in the decision-making process for booking a trip at this time. The Bahamas Out Island Promotion Board saw similar results from a survey they conducted over the summer months. The travelers rated a flexible hotel policy very high, and in fact, 57% or 48% of respondents said that the ability to cancel their hotel reservations up to 48 hours prior to arrival for predetermined COVID reasons and getting a full refund were the most important reasons. In fact, I should say 57% of repeat visitors stated that, and 59% of potential new visitors to the Bahamas. Another question that has been asked in surveys, and Minster referenced this: why would you travel to the Caribbean during this period? And overwhelmingly, the beach significantly outranks all other activities. Again, this is great news for us, as it perfectly aligns with our Bahamas product. Then went on to find out what would be your reason for choosing a family island. And this was ranked. There were several options given, and surprisingly, proximity was not a strong influencer for choosing the family islands. Rather, seclusion and uncrowdedness was the number one reason why prospective travelers would choose the family islands, followed by beaches, followed by activities such as boating, diving, and fishing. So we see that trend here. People want to escape, they want to go somewhere where it's not crowded and have access to beach, fishing, boating, and diving, all the things that we have in abundance. Throughout this period, the Ministry of Tourism has been working on its marketing strategy. We know that it is important to build demand for the destination, and to this end, we have come up with a detailed marketing plan that we have broken down into 3 phases. Phase 1, we will begin immediately, and this speaks to travel intent. What we're doing within the ministry is finding those people who are searching already and wanting to travel to the islands. And we're using Google, for example, to do this. Those persons will be retargeted, and we will serve them up a Bahamas ad. These are the people that we don't need to sell the destination to. And this phase will begin immediately after this press conference through to the end of October. And if people are asking why the soft approach if we're looking to build up pent-up demand, the reason is simple. We know that we are competing for ad space with US presidential elections at this time. And in fact, a lot of attention is focused on the US presidential elections. So this advertising space is crowded and there is no need to compete. But immediately following the presidential elections in the United States, we will then move on to phase 2, which is travel intent. And at this point, we will add some brand notifications to our advertising, because we know that as we approach Thanksgiving and Christmas, we want to begin being a lot more strategic. And therefore, we'll be releasing aspirational imagery and putting out branded ads with Expedia, one of the largest bookers of business to the Bahamas for the period for Thanksgiving and Christmas. And then phase 3 beginning in 2021. If all things considered, we've got a control over public health concerns, both within the Bahamas and our source markets. We hope to begin able to marketing as business as usual. Minister spoke to some degree about our airlift strategy, where we were focusing our airlift strategy. And this slide, I think, really highlights clearly where we will be focusing our efforts in the short term. Our marketing and advertising will be tied into the airlift strategy, but in addition, we've looked at those top performing gateways to see what protocols that are in place for those cities in North America and their current situation relative to COVID-19. And there is some light at the end of the tunnel. We can see that in a number of our key gateway cities, that those cities are recommending quarantine for persons arriving there, and even Toronto has imposed a 14-day quarantine. So notwithstanding that we will be inviting people for a VIP experience or vacation in place, the concept of vacationing in place will not be so difficult for people to grasp. Most importantly for us, we also see that the spread of COVID is either flattening or declining in our key market cities, and this proves or bodes very well for us here in the Bahamas. I thank you all very much, and of course look forward to answering any questions with the Minister hereafter.
Thank you, Director General Jiblu. It's clear the Bahamas is still rocking. At this time, we will open the floor for questions, beginning with Ms. Altaviz Munnings from ZNS. May we have your first question, please?
Good afternoon, everyone in attendance. My first question is, can the Minister or Director General describe what vacation in place or paradise looks like? What exactly would the visitor be experiencing when they're under quarantine at a hotel here in the Bahamas?
Minister?
Altaviz, good afternoon. So what we envision is that when a person goes onto a hotel property, they will be allowed to use all of the facilities in that hotel, and they will be allowed to move freely within the hotel property. You know, understand that everybody who will be coming onto that property will have received a COVID test prior to arrival. We discussed how the staff, we're encouraging the staff to be tested as well. So it will be a safe bubble where guests will be allowed to move freely throughout the entire property. So that's what vacationing in place will mean. You can use all of the facilities of the hotel. You can move freely through the property, go to all the food and beverage outlets, go on an excursion operated by hotel staff, and enjoy your stay, vacation in place in the Bahamas.
I know that the Ministry of Tourism is concentrating on U.S. and Canadian visitors. Is there a certain type from the U.S., a visitor, from the U.S. who wants to come here, families or couples or conferences that are interested in coming here when the borders reopen?
Thank you for the question, Altaviz. The data is showing us families, certainly in the holiday periods, they're the ones who are really keen on coming, but all our niche markets, and by niche markets or vertical markets, diving, boating, fishing, romance, they are trending very well. So persons who would enjoy these activities, private aviation obviously has been available from June 15th, and people have been able to come in, although when there were restrictions on inter-island travel, that impacted those for the moment. But we think leading up to Thanksgiving and certainly Christmas, we can expect to see families coming back. And I think one of the slides that Minister shared, that people are really very happy about taking a COVID test, and the protocols that are in place, they feel that it ensures safety for them and their families. And so they're comfortable and confident in bringing families to enjoy all that we have to offer here.
Thank you. Next, we have Jasmine Brown for Our News. Can we have your first question, please?
Good afternoon. This question is for the Minister. Minister DeAguilar, I think in April, we asked you outside of cabinet, considering all that's been happening with the pandemic, when, or in your plans or in the ministry's plans, when do you expect to see, or do you expect to see pre-COVID-19 travel numbers? Because I know 2019 was a pretty good year. So is it still the 18 months to 24-month period?
What an interesting question. But that was back in April. You're asking me to stroke my crystal ball and look out into the future and to see what visitor arrivals we're projecting. I don't know, 12, 18, 24 months. I think a number of people are saying it could take as long as 5 years to get back to pre-COVID levels. But I remain optimistic. I'm still going to stick with my 18 to 24 months, and we'll see where the cookie crumbles. But obviously, it's a guess at this stage. And as we get through, things may change markedly when a vaccine is rolled out, and that might really encourage people. Okay, I feel safer to travel. So we'll have to see how events unfold in the next coming months.
Okay, this next question is also for you. So we all know that Bahamas Air has struggled over the past few weeks, few months. So can you let us know how much money has the government pumped into Bahamas Air, I guess, recently to keep it afloat? And also, how much longer can the government continue to pump money into Bahamas Air? Because I know things are not going to be back to normal right away.
So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the chairman of Bahamas Air, he's closer to the numbers and he's on the ground. I'll let him answer that question, and if need be, I'll jump back in.
Thank you very much. With respect to the amount of money that the government has provided to Bahamas Air, this whole question arose that back in April and May, I indicated that the monthly costs from April, May, and June was $10.5 million, and it was averaged out $3.5 million. The minister and I then spent most of July and August doing a deeper dive into the finances of Bahamas Air, and really the cost structure came out to $84 million. And when you heard the minister say $7 million a month, that really accounted for, 84 million a year, coming out to $7 million a month. And that's the difference in the figure. So there's no massaging the figures. It is what it is. Really, there's a personnel cost of around $3.5 million a month. There are other expenses in terms of you've got to go and keep the engines running and so on. And critical expenses, we still have to pay rent in all the airports that we fly to in order to retain those. The good news is, as indicated in the minister's remarks, we're going to begin to start domestic travel later this week. Now, what does that mean? We don't know if there's pent-up demand. We know that there are persons in some of the family islands that want to come to New Providence. And so those persons coming from any family island other than Grand Bahama, as I understand, will not need to have a COVID test and to quarantine once they arrive. However, those persons coming from New Providence or Grand Bahama, anywhere, before they get on the plane, have to have a negative PCR test result before they're able to get on the plane, and then they need to quarantine for 14 days at their destination. That's going to mean there's not going to be much travel that way.
Thank you. We'll have Mr. Theodore Seeley from Eyewitness News. May we have your first question, please?
Hi, good afternoon. My first question is for the minister. I noted on his initial chart that he presented where we were looking at the travel requirements across the Caribbean, the Bahamas, Jamaica, Dominican Republic, Aruba, and others. The Bahamas is the only one on that list that is not quite currently requiring a test upon arrival from visitors. Any particular reason why when we compare to other Caribbean islands? And will this again be a misstep on our behalf, not requiring that test upon arrival?
Minister?
So, very good question, Theo. The Ministry of Health has always stipulated that they wanted persons to test before they come here. They felt that before you get on that plane, or as close to as possible before you get on that plane, they wanted to know your COVID-19 status, and they wanted that to be the deciding factor on whether you come here or not. Obviously, when you get here, and then you test positive, that's a problem, especially if you're a visitor. What are we going to do with you? Where are we going to put you? Where are we going to quarantine you? So that is why our requirement, and that's why we reduced the requirement from 10 days down to 5 days to improve the accuracy of that test. And obviously now every single person coming into the country will be required to get a test. Those other destinations that are testing on arrival mostly are the rapid tests. And I could see that possibly being irrelevant for Bahamians and for residents. But we're going to stay focused, per the advice of the Ministry of Health, on testing people before they get here. It would be most ideal that before you stepped on the plane, we could test you. But obviously that's not realistic. So we're going to test you, within the 5 days before you arrive here.
Thank you. My second question, looking at the charts that the Director General presented, 40% of the US market and 30% of the Canadian market are booking in advance for 2021. We know that hotels, especially in New Providence, postponed their reopening based on market statistics. Could this mean that hotel properties, major hotel properties, could very well opt out of opening for Thanksgiving and December, and we could see properties like Bahama and Atlantis actually opening in January instead?
Thank you for the question, Seeley. In answering that, I think some of the other slides that I showed also indicated that once the announcement was made that the Bahamas was reopening from a tourism sector, we saw spikes in bookings to the Bahamas. So if we looked at where we were in February in terms of hotel bookings, we looked once the borders closed down, the drop in bookings and visitations to our website, and then we looked June, July when we opened again. And so looking at all the statistics, the desire, the demand, and knowing if once we get airlift in, and those conversations are going very, very well with our airline partners, they're just waiting for a go-ahead, and of course it will be a slow ramp up, but we feel that we will begin to see demand by Thanksgiving, certainly into Christmas and New Year. So I put that slide out there because people are looking to 2021 if they have opportunity to be flexible. But it's worth taking note of the fact that that flexibility clause was there as well, so that if they booked now for 2021, they could cancel if they needed to be. So that was also a hook for that particular question.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Karen Bain from Global 99.5 FM.
Yes, good afternoon. My question is for Minister D'Aguilar. Our beaches and Bahamian culture are main top reasons why visitors come to the Bahamas. So what is being done to bring relief to our Bahamian musicians, junkaneurs, and entertainers, as well as artisans before the reopening?
That's a very tough question. We are obviously, now that we've decided on an opening date, we're going to, first and foremost, focus on getting our hotel properties open. And then we're going to look at our artisans and how we can incorporate them into the product and really encourage our hotel partners to start to embrace as much about the Bahamas as they can in their hotel product. So, right now, as we look at it between here and Thanksgiving and December, there's a lot of uncertainty. People don't know how this is going to work. And once we get more comfortable and we get in our stride and people start to come and they feel comfortable and we deliver the product as they expect us to do, then we will bring more and more onboarding, more and more options for visitors to experience as many Bahamian things as possible. I'm sure at the outset it'll be somewhat slow, but as that confidence level improves, I think more and more musicians and artisans will be embraced. As it relates to Junkanoo, that's a decision made in another place by another person after reviewing many things, so I suggest you direct that question there. I don't know how that's going to work out. I mean, I've heard some things, but I suggest you speak to the professionals in that area to get that response.
May we have your second question?
Yes, thank you very much, sir. My next question is for the Director General. Grand Bahama visually is not appealing to the residents nor visitors. Iconic landmarks such as the International Bazaar, Xanadu Hotel, and of course, Casa Bahama, which is the tallest building on Grand Bahama Island, are in need of renovations, or in some cases, they need to be demolished. What are the plans of Ministry of Tourism's team to address the situation?
So over the last few months, during this period of where we know that business was slow and we were able to come together as a group and plan and map out the way forward, one of the things that occurred with our product development unit that I'm particularly proud of was that an audit was done in all of our islands, or our main tourism islands, looking at product, what needed to be done from a cleanliness, from an upgrade, you name it, it happened. And so we've got that audit report from our tourism sector, our tourism, our monuments, those things that stand out, and we'll be working on those. This is something that we recognize, I think, being closed down. Here in Nassau, our head office is in Nassau. If you drive down Bay Street, now that it's empty, you get to see in living color the state of our main thoroughfare on the island of Nassau. And I know that this is replicated throughout the islands of the Bahamas. So this is something that we have talked about, put plans in place. Grand Bahama is a part of that. We do have a product audit report from Grand Bahama, and those things that we can begin in a small step within the Ministry of Tourism, and those things that we will have to go for a broad approach, either private public sector or working multi-sectorally. We will begin working on those as well. So thank you, noted. Grand Bahama is one out of all the islands in need of product upgrade.
Thank you. Ms. Sasha Lightborn from Our News.
Yes, good afternoon. My first question is for the Minister. Minister, you spoke specifically to testing for hotel workers, noting that the PCR tests are very expensive and may be very expensive for hotels to ensure that their staff are properly tested. Can you go into some more depth on how this testing of staff should be done and why those numbers won't add into the regular dashboard? Let's say if a hotel staff worker has tested positive, you said those numbers won't be added into the regular dashboard. So just give us a little bit more clarity on that, please.
Sasha, great question. So the Ministry of Health is the entity that manages that dashboard. And they have a rule that only PCR testing is the accepted test that they will include in their statistics. So you can get a PCR test from a number of sources. You can get it from the government, you can get it from a private lab, and those statistics all collate at the end of the day to be included in the dashboard. The efficacy or the accuracy of a PCR test is considered to be the gold standard, 99%, let's use that number. The less expensive other tests probably have an accuracy level, if you read the literature, probably the low 90s to the mid 90s. So it's not quite as accurate. but it's certainly a lot less expensive. And so, you know, if you want to do a pre-screening, if you want to say, okay, I obviously can't afford to spend $200 on a test. I've got 1,000 employees, that's 200,000 a pop. That's just going to be remarkably expensive. So if I can go with a less expensive, and I think they're all coming to market, these lower cost testing mechanisms, you can do that, and they have a 93, 94, 95% accuracy. That will at least give you the ability to screen rather inexpensively, and in 95% of the times catch a COVID test. And then if they test positive using that pre-screening, then you can then move them on to a PCR test to confirm whether that is indeed the case. And so what we've done is we've gone out into the market and we've sort of spoken to some of the labs, and we're saying, you know, the hotel industry, and this has generally come from them, would like to do some form of testing. Are they allowed to do tests other than the PCR testing? And the Ministry of Health is sure. I mean, you can do whatever testing you want. And obviously the labs are then going to go and source those that have the highest efficacy, accuracy, and market that to businesses. What we want to do is we want to encourage as much testing, certainly in the hotel sector, as possible, and we don't want the cost to be as much of a barrier. If you hold fast to the PCR testing, that's a significant barrier, and people may be less likely to test. But we think it's better for them to do some testing. May not be the gold standard testing, but it's better to do some testing, even if the accuracy level is slightly diminished, but the cost is affordable. So that is what we're thinking, and we think that'll be a good screening mechanism from the outset.
Minister, sorry, just for clarity, the hotels will absorb the cost for those tests, or do the employees have to absorb that cost?
I guess each business will do what they want, but if it was me, as a business, I would obviously want my staff to test, and I would absorb that cost.
Thank you. My second question is for the chairman of Bahamas Air, Mr. Tommy Turnquest. Mr. Turnquest, what will Bahamas Air's executive do to ensure that customers as well as staff are protected? You know, those planes they have you in close proximity. I'm sure Bahamas Air wants to recoup some of the losses, so you won't sell a 50% plane, or is that something that's being considered? What measures will be put in place to make sure staff and customers are protected?
Thank you, Sasha. Firstly, with regard to the staff, we have set up a COVID-19 task force within Bahamas Air with membership from all of the departments, going through the protocol. We have written manuals with the protocol for all staff members. We have one for the administration and human resources for those persons who have desk jobs. And then we have another one for flight operations, because the cabin attendants and the pilots obviously would have a greater impact because they're then interfacing with the general public, as would customer service agents at airports and check-in desks and boarding desks. So obviously those persons, we have specific protocol. One thing that I do want to say is that the masks are mandatory, and you would have seen some persons using a face shield in the past. We've made it very specific that if you wear a face shield, you must also wear a mask. With respect to the passengers, there are those passengers who would have had to have been tested as the health protocol would require. We've followed in terms of IATA and what they've outlined in terms of the spacing on the aircraft. We are utilizing all the seats that are sold, but in those instances where the loads are low, and we expect them to be low in the early days, we will have physical distancing as much as possible.
Thank you, Sasha. We have Mr. Tyler Simonet from JCN. May we have your first question, please?
Hi, good afternoon to the tourism team and to all who are listening. My first question is, when it comes to the tourists who will vacation in place, who will be in charge of monitoring and stopping the tourists from leaving their designated area? For example, will it be the Royal Bahamas Police Force? Will they be helping out, or will it just be hotel security ensuring this? What kind of security system is expected to be put into place to make sure tourists don't break their VIP protocols?
Minister.
First and foremost, businesses will be required to come up with protocols to ensure that their customers remain on property. As you go into Bahamian businesses now, you have to ensure that people social distance, wear masks. That's a requirement of every business that's open and able to operate. And so too will the hotels be required to ensure that most hotels have hotel security to ensure that persons remain on property. And also remember that when you land in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, you go to immigration and then they refer you to the hubcap monitoring system. Your app will be on your phone, and that will ensure that you remain on property. Obviously, people can leave their phones in their rooms and decide to walk off the property, but we're assuming and we're hoping that they will be very clear on what the protocols are and very clear based on our list of requirements when you come in the country, what the penalties are if you wander off property. So as best as possible, we'll try to monitor, the businesses will monitor it, and obviously we have the electronic component to back that up.
May we have your second question, please, Tyler?
Oh, yes, thank you for that answer. My second question is, it seems as if the VIP experience will be mostly beneficial to those major hotels that are all inclusive and have those activities that can be done on the hotel's property grounds. Is there a plan for the smaller hotels who aren't able to offer the same services, or will they have to wait for the protocols to be a bit more lenient in order to benefit from the tourism industry again?
Thank you. DG?
Yeah. This is an observation that we certainly have made. The larger resorts will benefit greatly, but most of our hotels are on the waterfront. Obviously, the recommendation from the Ministry of Tourism, based on the data, all the surveys, research, people are coming for the beach. And most people are demonstrating, as long as they can get to the beach, that they will be okay. So restaurants, every hotel has a restaurant or 2 restaurants. Obviously, curbside delivery can work in a hotel as well. This provides an opportunity for Bahamians to be entrepreneurial and work with hotels if someone wants to have food delivered to the hotel that's not available in the hotel. But if they have whatever they have within the hotel, they can use, but primarily the pool and the beach is what we know people are coming for in the short term. And again, the research is telling us people don't want to be in crowded spaces. They don't want to be out and about. So I think for the moment, our first sets of visitors will be quite happy with that experience. But obviously, as time goes on, we will like to see more and more of the excursions, attractions opening up, adhering to all the protocols so that people can enjoy and the benefit trickles down to those tour operators and excursion operators.
Thank you. Notario McKinsey, Eyewitness Digital. May we have your first question?
Good morning. I just wanted to, perhaps the minister or the DG could maybe expand on what the numbers were saying relative to the boating segment. I know that's more of a, perhaps a more high-end segment, and it's sort of been perhaps weathered the COVID restrictions a bit better. I'm just wondering what the numbers were looking like in terms of boating this year.
Notario, good afternoon. While the Ministry of Tourism generates a lot of data, and I'm sure that's somewhere in the data, I don't have my fingertips on that. What I will say is that the Bahamas does remain very, very attractive for yachting. I think we have to establish our protocols, and we have to stop changing them and settle down on them. But certainly the Bahamas is ideally suited for yachting. When you come into the Bahamas, and thank you for that question because it's important for me to state this, you can also quarantine in place or vacation in place on your yacht. So you can come in, check in, and once you remain visiting islands that have no population, we want to get to the position where you can come in, check in, quarantine, and if you move to places where there are no population centers. Of course, the Bahamas has got 2,000 keys, 700 islands. Only 50 of them are inhabited, so that leaves a lot of options for people to go and enjoy the incredible beauty of the Bahamas from their yacht. So it is once again, another attractive destination. We're in the midst of the hurricane season, so lots of people who had their boats here have sort of taken them out, and they're waiting for the hurricane season to pass through. But we envision that being a very lucrative market for us. But I'm sorry, I don't have the exact details.
We'd like to have your second question, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Perhaps again, just wondering, Minister, how concerned are you about Bay Street survival, given, I guess, the sentiments of the cruise lines and how that industry is looking?
Yes. Once again, great question. As I said, the cruise industry, we still don't know when the cruise industry is going to start. If you speak to the cruise executives, sort of end of November, early December, but certainly when they start, they're going to be very, very concerned about how their customers go off their boats, off their ships, and what they do before they come back on. Now, if you're going on a very short cruise, my argument's going to be, if you're doing on a 3-day cruise, assuming you test visitors before they get on the ship, they will have gone through their cruise and back to wherever they started, Miami, Canaveral, or Fort Lauderdale, the 3 busiest cruise ports in the world, before they present with anything. So if I had my druthers, I would allow them to come off and to experience what we have to offer. Obviously, everybody wearing a mask, everybody social distancing, and we'd have to think through how those protocols will work in such cramped quarters as straw markets and other venues on Bay Street. But I think the cruise companies are going to be extremely cautious when they restart. They're going to, they will have won a battle with the CDC, and I'm sure the CDC will have put a lot of requirements on them. And so I think they're indicating to me that they don't even want to come to our population centers to begin with. They want to go to their private islands where they can control the process. But I told them, as the Minister of Tourism of the Bahamas, I could accept that for a short period, but you need to come to our population centers to start making some economic impact. So this is, nobody knows yet because they're not up and sailing. But once that starts, then we'll be able to see how that works out on our major economic center like Nassau.
Thank you, Minister. This is Marco Lightborn of the Blaze FM in Exuma. May we have your first question, please?
Hi, good afternoon. So my first question, the minister mentioned in his presentation that the ministry is likely to turn to the private sector and utilize AI technology as the volume of testing for incoming tourists may be too overwhelming and we'd want to avoid inconveniencing guests. Is there a way for this process and any similar ones to be done by Bahamian workers and create new jobs, even if it's just temporary?
Minister.
So that's a great question. So when we reduced the validity of the COVID test from 10 days to 5 days, that had the unintended consequence of really creating a scenario where we'd have to approve these tests very quickly. So someone goes out, they give their sample to get their COVID test. Let's say they give it takes 2 or 3 days for them to get the test back. Then they have to upload it. And then either the day before they travel or the day of their travel, they're going to be uploading this test. So we're going to have to be on our game. So when we thought about how best to review these tests, we see once, what we're doing now, that the same labs come up over and over and over again. So we know where the date the specimen was collected. We know where the result is. We know that it's an accredited lab. So what we need is for artificial intelligence to look at the lab result, read it, look for the necessary data that is relevant, and approve it automatically. And that's what we're going to have to utilize artificial intelligence to do. And as it reads more and more of these tests and different tests from different labs, it gets to understand, okay, I've seen this before. This is where the data is. This is what I'm looking for. Approve it. And yes, absolutely. We are looking at all the companies that we're looking at to do this for us. First of all, we have the government, which is presently doing, which has made the current product. But certainly the companies that we are looking at are all Bahamian. And they're probably going to use some foreign component in the background, but certainly we're not dealing with non-Bahamians, we're dealing with Bahamians to deliver this product for us, so absolutely. And then as we screen it, because there'll always be new tests from new places, and I mean, as you can imagine, you get a test. I looked at one the other day from Bangkok, Thailand. So you have to look at it, you have to get familiar with it. Is it an accredited lab? Is this a real test? Is this a legitimate test? So some of them are obviously going to have to be read by human beings. So we're just going to have to be on top of our game to ensure that we can do it within the time frame that we have created for ourselves.
Thank you. May we have your second question, please?
Thank you, Minister. And my second question is really a clarification on the tentative date when all hotels will be considered quarantine facilities. Are Airbnbs included as well, or are they disqualified?
Minister?
No. If you're aware, when you return home, you have really three places where you can quarantine. You can quarantine in your own home, assuming you have your own bedroom and bathroom. So that's kind of an Airbnb type product. The second place where you can vacation in place, quarantine, is in a hotel. And the third place you can vacation in place or quarantine is on a yacht or a boat. So those are your three options. And obviously most returning residents will quarantine, vacation in place in their own home. So an Airbnb product can be used by a visitor wishing to come to the Bahamas, but obviously, if you're a visitor, you're going to want that Airbnb to have certain facilities because you're not just going to want to sit in a room and stare at a wall for 14 days. You're going to want to use some facilities there. So I presume the Airbnbs with pools and other, or that are beachfront, are going to be the more attractive for our foreign visitors.
Thank you. Rachel Knowles for the Nassau Guardian. May I have your first question, please?
Good afternoon. My question is for Minister D'Aguilar. I know that he spoke to encouraging hotel workers to get tested. And my question is the government going to help pay or fund for hotel staff to get tested periodically? They'll be going home, of course, to their families and interacting in the community. And if not, how can hotels be considered a safe bubble if there isn't regular testing that isn't at the expense of employees?
Thank you.
I would think that it would be in the best interest of the business, obviously, to test your staff as regularly as you see fit. The government isn't taking on that liability, no. We're going to encourage, and actually the hotels were the ones that came to us and said, look, we want to do this. How can we best do this? So they obviously thought that PCR testing was the only option. And really, no, you as any business in the Bahamas can use whatever testing that you see fit for your staff. Now, we thought the temperature checking was a little weak. And so PCR testing is obviously the best, but very expensive. So we were looking to create options in the middle for businesses to do at least some testing or some screening of their staff that will mitigate, maybe not eliminate, but mitigate as much as possible the possibility that their staff have been infected. So we're hoping that the businesses take on this task, and it's in their best interests. They want a healthy workforce, and they want to ensure that the employees that are showing up to work are COVID-free in order to interact with their customers.
Thank you. May we have your final question?
Yes, and secondly, will Bahamians be allowed to patronize hotel properties without a negative test?
Another interesting question. Yeah, this became a bit of an issue in July, and what we want to say is that if you want to go into a hotel, or if you want to use a hotel, that you should have received a test. We can't. It makes no sense if everybody coming from overseas has had a test, and then you come in domestically and you don't have a test. But we would encourage businesses to allow Bahamians to use some of their facilities. So if I want to use a restaurant, maybe I can use the outdoor portion of the restaurant at a particular hotel. This is a tightrope that we're trying to walk, how best to accommodate the domestic market while opening ourselves to our very important international market. And obviously, our advice would be to get everybody tested that comes into your facility, because I think it bodes well for your business. But it's going to be a difficult rope to walk, and certainly if you want to open certain features within your hotel, I may not want to stay there, but I may want to go to your restaurant. How can I best use that and stay within the safety protocols and the health protocols that you have established on property, and not end up infecting or potentially infecting people by frequenting your operation?
Thank you, Minister. Ms. Paige McCartney, Nassau Guardian Business, may we have your first question?
Hi there, everyone. So given our country's strained fiscal situation right now, I imagine the ministry's marketing budget is quite tight. Can you say how much the marketing budget is, and if the, I guess, lack of marketing in the past couple of months has freed up some marketing funds? And also, I know in the past, this isn't my second question, but I know in the past we've offered incentives to airlines and cruise lines to drive tourists to the country. Is that also a part of the marketing strategy?
Thank you. DG?
Thank you, Paige. Not just interesting, but very, very topical. I think everyone within the Bahamas knows that all our ministries, throughout all the ministries, the budgets were cut at the beginning of this budget period for 2020-2021. Ministry of Tourism was no exception. We saw a 20% cut in our budget. Beyond that, we know that with the second lockdown, that has impacted revenue to governments, and so monies that we even expected have been reduced potentially. We're all hopeful that we will receive those monies. So I say all of that to say that, yes, indeed, our budgets are greatly reduced. So what is it that the Ministry of Tourism is doing? That's why we're not going out strong between now and the U.S. presidential elections. It doesn't make sense. We cannot pay the cost that all the media outlets are charging. This is premium with the U.S. election. And furthermore, the marketplace is crowded, so we wouldn't want to compete. But there are other things that we can do. So social media, we've been utilizing, and we will continue to utilize every single arm of social media. Beyond that, we're leveraging partnerships, relationships. Hurricane Dorian, through that very difficult time, the world, including the media world, was very kind and generous to the Bahamas. Offers that were made to us to help us at that time, people have graciously put on hold. And so we're now going back, reminding people of their offers, promises, conversations that we had, and we will employ those as well. And to the point of incentives to airlines and cruise lines, we've moved away from paying incentives to the airlines and the cruise lines. Interestingly enough, some of our airline partners have actually come to the table and said things have been so difficult for us. What can you offer via way of incentive? Well, we do not want to go down that route again, but we're always interested in doing a cooperative marketing campaign that we will market within that market area, and we will tag our airline partners. So if it's a gateway where there's a particular airline come from and we do a campaign there, we will tag Visit the Bahamas and check out the name of the airline, for example. And airlines are very happy with this type of arrangement. But we're also seeing reductions in our budgets, and so this is what we're communicating, but we're open to communication. We're talking it through and working with our partners, and we feel that working even with the private sector, collaboratively, strategically, we're going to be okay. We will be out in the marketplace where we need to be.
Okay, thank you so much. And my next question is for Minister D'Aguilar. Has the sale of the Grand Lucayan and Grand Bahama closed?
It close, but not yet. We are, we signed the deal to sell it and proceed forward on the 3rd of March, and then the pandemic hit. So that then threw, we were so close, so we could smell the victory, we could taste the sale, and then the pandemic came along and caused a sort of renegotiation of certain aspects of that deal. But we feel that certainly the discussions are very robust. I was on the phone twice last week on a Zoom call with the prospective buyers, and so they're still very interested, we're still very engaged, and hopefully in the very not too distant future we'll have something positive to report, but we are getting there. So thank you very much.
Thank you to all the members of the media for your questions. That concludes our presentation for the day. Please be sure to visit us at www.bahamas.com for more information. Thank you for tuning in.